When most people think of rats, they think of the small, gray, disease-carrying pests that live in the walls of their apartment. But rats come in a much wider range of sizes than most people realize, and some of them are large enough to make a house cat think twice. In today's video, we'll be ranking all 7 continents based on their largest rat. And to start, we'll be heading to the one continent that shouldn't have any rats at all. Antarctica has no native rats, because Antarctica has no native land mammals of any kind. But rats have a way of showing up uninvited to places they don't belong. And for over 200 years, the sub-Antarctic island of South Georgia was overrun by millions of invasive rats that were devastating the island's native seabird populations with a thoroughness that was pushing some species toward extinction. The rats arrived on South Georgia aboard whaling and sealing ships in the 18th and 19th centuries, and in the absence of any natural predators, they multiplied into one of the densest rat populations on any island in the world. They ate the eggs and chicks of ground-nesting seabirds, including South Georgia pipits, pintails, and several species of petrel and prion. And their predation was so severe that some bird species had been completely eliminated from the sections of the island where rats were present. Between 2011 and 2015, the South Georgia Heritage Trust carried out the largest rat eradication project ever attempted on any island in the world. The operation involved spreading rodenticide bait across approximately 42,000 acres of mountainous, glaciated, and extraordinarily difficult terrain using helicopters flying systematic grid patterns over the entire island. The project cost approximately $13 million, took 4 years to complete, and required the island to be divided into discrete zones separated by glaciers that acted as natural barriers to prevent rats from recolonizing cleared areas. In 2018, after 2 years of intensive monitoring with thousands of detection devices and no confirmed rat sightings, South Georgia was officially declared rat-free, and the recovery of its native bird populations has been described as one of the most successful conservation stories of the 21st century. Seabird species that had not bred successfully on rat-infested parts of the island for decades are now nesting and raising chicks across the entire coastline for the first time in over 2 centuries. Antarctica's story is not about the size of its rats, but about the extraordinary effort required to remove them, and the continent takes the 7th place spot. Europe's largest rat is the brown rat, also known as the Norway rat, and it is the species that most people in the Western world picture when they hear the word rat. It is found on every continent except Antarctica, but it originated in the temperate forests of northern China and Mongolia and spread westward across Europe via trade routes in the 18th century, eventually reaching every port city on the planet via cargo ships. An adult brown rat typically weighs between 7 and 18 ounces, with large, well-fed urban individuals occasionally reaching 2 pounds, and it is one of the most successful and adaptable mammals on the planet, thriving in sewers, subway tunnels, warehouses, farms, and anywhere else that humans produce food waste. The brown rat's relationship with humanity is one of the longest and most consequential in the history of civilization. Its predecessor in European cities, the black rat, is believed to have been the primary carrier of the fleas that transmitted the bubonic plague, which killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people across Europe, Asia, and Africa in the 14th century, and which remains one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. The brown rat displaced the black rat across most of Europe in the 18th century, and while the brown rat can also carry plague, its preference for sewer systems and underground spaces rather than the rooftops and attics favored by the black rat means that it has somewhat less direct contact with human living spaces. In London, the estimated rat population is believed to number in the millions, and the city's Victorian-era sewer system provides an almost limitless habitat for a species that thrives in dark, damp, enclosed spaces with abundant food and water. Reports of so-called super rats, which are brown rats that have developed genetic resistance to common anticoagulant rodenticides, have become increasingly common across the UK and Europe, and pest control professionals have warned that traditional rat poisons are becoming less effective against these resistant populations. Europe and its brown rat take the 6th place spot. North America's most distinctive native rat is not the invasive brown rat that infests its cities, but the bushy-tailed woodrat, a native species commonly known as the pack rat, which is found across the mountains and deserts of the western United States and Canada. Pack rats are medium-sized rodents that typically weigh between 7 and 21 ounces, with the largest individuals occasionally exceeding a pound, and they are distinguished from other rats by their large, dark eyes, their enormous rounded ears, and their distinctive bushy tails that look like they belong on a squirrel rather than on a rat. Pack rats are famous, and in some parts of the American West infamous, for their compulsive and indiscriminate collecting behavior, which has earned them a prominent place in Western American folklore and a permanent grudge in the hearts of anyone who has ever left a cabin, a shed, or a parked car unattended in pack rat country. They build large, complex nests called middens from sticks, cactus pads, bones, rocks, animal droppings, dried vegetation, and an eclectic, seemingly random collection of found objects that they carry back from their nightly foraging excursions with a dedication that borders on the obsessive. They are particularly attracted to shiny, colorful, and unusual objects, and pack rat middens discovered in barns, cabins, and abandoned buildings across the American West have been found to contain coins, keys, rifle cartridges, bottle caps, strips of aluminum foil, fragments of broken glass, jewelry, small tools, spent ammunition casings, wrapped candy, and in one widely reported and probably embellished case, a set of dentures that the rat had apparently removed from a camper's tent while the owner slept. Some pack rats have been observed dropping one collected item in order to pick up another that they find more appealing, which has given rise to the persistent folk belief that pack rats are traders who will leave you something in exchange for what they take. They are not traders. They are simply hoarders with full mouths and limited carrying capacity. These middens are cemented together with the rat's crystallized urine, which dries and hardens into a dark, amber-like substance called amberot that is extraordinarily durable and that can preserve the contents of the midden in a stable, unchanging condition for tens of thousands of years. Ancient pack rat middens, some of which date back over 50,000 years, have become one of the most valuable and most unexpected tools in paleoclimatology and paleobotany, because the seeds, leaves, twigs, pollen, and insect parts preserved inside them provide a detailed, precisely datable record of what was growing in the area at the time the midden was constructed. North America and its pack rat take the 5th place spot. South America is home to some of the largest rodents on the planet, including the capybara, which is the largest living rodent at up to 140 pounds, and the pacarana, which can weigh over 30 pounds. But the continent's largest rat-like rodent is the coypu, better known in the United States as the nutria, which is native to the wetlands, rivers, and lakes of southern South America, from central Chile and Argentina north through Uruguay, Paraguay, and southern Brazil. The coypu is a large, semi-aquatic rodent that looks like a rat that has been scaled up to an alarming degree, with coarse, dark brown fur, a long, round, scaly tail, prominent orange incisors, and webbed hind feet that it uses for swimming. An adult coypu can weigh between 12 and 20 pounds, with some large males exceeding 25 pounds, and its body length can reach approximately 2 feet, not including the tail, which adds another foot. In its native South American range, the coypu plays a natural ecological role in wetland ecosystems, feeding on aquatic vegetation and helping to maintain open water channels in marshlands. But the coypu has become a globally destructive invasive species after being exported to North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa for the fur trade in the early 20th century. If you want early access to our videos, check out the Loving Feral Spotify channel. The link is in the description. Escaped and released coypus have established invasive populations on every continent they were brought to, and the damage they cause to wetland ecosystems, as we covered in a previous video, has been enormous. South America and its coypu take the 4th place spot. Africa's largest rat is the Gambian pouched rat, and it is an animal that has earned a reputation not for the damage it causes, but for the lives it saves. The Gambian pouched rat is found across sub-Saharan Africa, from Senegal in the west to Kenya and Tanzania in the east, and it is the largest rat species in Africa, with adults reaching body lengths of approximately 14 to 17 inches, not including the tail, and weighing up to 3 pounds or more. It gets its name from the large hamster-like cheek pouches that it uses to carry food back to its burrow, stuffing them with seeds, nuts, and fruits until its face bulges out to nearly twice its normal width, which gives it an appearance that is simultaneously practical and comical. The Gambian pouched rat has an extraordinary sense of smell that is believed to rival that of a dog, and this remarkable olfactory ability has been harnessed by a Belgian non-profit organization called Apopo to create one of the most innovative, most cost-effective, and most heartwarming wildlife programs in the history of humanitarian aid. Apopo trains Gambian pouched rats, which they have branded as hero rats, to detect the chemical scent of TNT in buried anti-personnel landmines, and to identify the volatile organic compound markers of active tuberculosis infection in human sputum samples. The landmine detection program, which began in Mozambique in the early 2000s, has been transformative. A trained hero rat can search approximately 2,000 square feet of suspected minefield in just 20 minutes, a task that would take a human deminer equipped with a metal detector approximately 4 days to complete with comparable confidence. The rats are trained to pause and scratch at the ground when they detect the scent of explosives beneath the surface, and crucially, they weigh too little to trigger the pressure-activated mines they are detecting, which means that they can walk directly over a buried mine without risk. Since the program began, hero rats have helped clear millions of square feet of mined land across Mozambique, Tanzania, Angola, Cambodia, Zimbabwe, and Colombia, returning farmland and infrastructure to communities that had been unable to use it for decades because of the threat of buried ordnance. The tuberculosis detection program has been equally impressive. In countries where TB kills hundreds of thousands of people per year, many cases go undiagnosed because laboratory testing is slow, expensive, and prone to false negatives, particularly in overloaded clinics that process thousands of samples per day. A trained hero rat can screen 100 TB samples in approximately 20 minutes, a task that would take a laboratory technician an entire day. And the rats have identified tens of thousands of positive TB cases that had been missed by conventional microscopy testing, potentially saving the lives of patients who would otherwise have gone untreated. The rats work for food rewards, typically pieces of banana, peanut, and avocado, and they approach their detection tasks with an enthusiasm and an eagerness that is genuinely endearing to watch. They are trained entirely through positive reinforcement, and they develop strong, recognizable bonds with their individual handlers, who describe them as intelligent, curious, surprisingly playful, and genuinely affectionate animals that enjoy physical contact and that will actively seek out human attention during breaks in their training sessions. Africa and its Gambian pouched rat take the third-place spot. And for our next section, we'll be heading to a volcanic crater in the highlands of Papua New Guinea for a rat that wasn't even known to science until 2009. The Bosavi woolly rat was discovered in 2009 during a BBC Natural History expedition to the crater of Mount Bosavi, an extinct volcano in the remote Southern Highlands province of Papua New Guinea. The expedition team, which included scientists from several universities and the Smithsonian Institution, descended into the volcano's crater, which is approximately 5 miles wide and over 3,000 feet deep, and which contains an isolated pocket of pristine tropical rainforest that has been cut off from the surrounding landscape for approximately 200,000 years. Inside this natural laboratory of isolation and evolution, the team discovered over 40 previously unknown species, including frogs, fish, insects, and a bat. But the discovery that generated the most headlines and the most public fascination was a giant, docile, silver-furred rat that was so unafraid of humans that it sat on the researchers' boots and allowed itself to be picked up and examined without any attempt to flee or bite. The Bosavi woolly rat weighs approximately 3 pounds and measures approximately 32 inches from nose to tail tip, which makes it roughly the size of a small domestic cat and significantly larger than any other rat species in Oceania or the wider Pacific region. It has thick, dense, silvery gray fur that gives it a woolly, almost plush appearance that is quite unlike the sleek, coarse-furred rats that most people are familiar with. And its body shape is stocky, rounded, and well-insulated, suggesting an animal that is adapted to the cool, damp conditions of the montane cloud forest that fills the crater floor. What captivated the public about the Bosavi woolly rat even more than its size was its remarkable temperament. The rat showed absolutely no fear of the human researchers who discovered it, sitting calmly on their boots, allowing itself to be picked up and examined without any attempt to flee, bite, or struggle, and displaying a docile, curious demeanor that was completely at odds with the nervous, suspicious behavior that characterizes virtually every other rat species in the world. This extraordinary tameness is almost certainly the result of evolving in an environment with very few or no mammalian predators inside the isolated crater, a pattern that has been documented in island species worldwide, from the fearless Falkland Islands wolf to the famously trusting dodo. Animals that have never encountered a predator capable of harming them simply never develop the fear response, and the Bosavi woolly rat's willingness to sit calmly on a human boot was not bravery or stupidity, but the perfectly logical behavior of an animal whose evolutionary history contained no reason to be afraid of anything standing on two legs. The Bosavi woolly rat has not yet been formally described and given an official scientific name, partly because access to the Mount Bosavi crater is extremely difficult, requiring days of hiking through dense tropical forest followed by a steep descent into the crater itself, and partly because the limited number of specimens collected during the 2009 expedition were insufficient for the kind of comprehensive anatomical and genetic analysis that a full taxonomic description requires. It remains one of the most charismatic and most mysterious rodent discoveries of the 21st century, and the fact that it was found inside a volcanic crater that had been isolated from the outside world for 200,000 years gives its story an almost cinematic quality. Oceania and its Bosavi woolly rat take the second-place spot. And for our final section, we'll be heading to the cloud forests of the Philippines for the largest rat on the planet. The northern Luzon giant cloud rat is the largest living rat species in the world, and it is an animal that completely redefines what most people think a rat can be. It is found in the cloud forests of northern Luzon, the largest island in the Philippines, at elevations of approximately 3,500 to 7,500 feet. And it is a slow-moving, nocturnal, arboreal animal that spends its entire life in the forest canopy, climbing through the branches with a deliberate, careful gait that is more reminiscent of a sloth or a possum than of the frantic, scurrying rats that most people are familiar with. An adult northern Luzon giant cloud rat can weigh up to 5.5 pounds and measure approximately 2.5 feet from nose to tail tip, which makes it roughly the size of a small dog and approximately 10 times heavier than the brown rats that live in European sewers. The cloud rat's appearance is as far from the stereotypical city rat as it is biologically possible to get, while still being classified in the same order of mammals. It has thick, soft, luxurious dark brown or black fur on its back that is dense enough to feel almost like a plush toy, a bright white belly, a long, bushy, dark-furred tail that it uses for balance as it moves through the canopy, a broad, rounded face with large, dark, expressive eyes, and small, rounded ears that give it an overall appearance that is much closer to a giant squirrel or an exotic stuffed animal than to anything you would find in a subway tunnel or behind a restaurant dumpster. It is a herbivore that feeds almost exclusively on young leaves, tender shoots, buds, and fruits in the forest canopy. And it nests in large tree hollows in old-growth hardwood trees that it lines with chewed bark and leaves to create a warm, insulated sleeping chamber. Unlike the hyper-reproductive brown rat, which can reach sexual maturity at 5 weeks of age, and can produce litters of 7 to 14 pups every 21 to 23 days under ideal conditions, allowing a single breeding pair to theoretically produce thousands of descendants in a single year, the northern Luzon giant cloud rat takes an entirely different reproductive approach. It produces only 1 or 2 young per year, The young are born relatively developed and are nursed for an extended period, and the parents invest heavily in each offspring rather than flooding the environment with hundreds of babies and hoping that some survive. This K-selected reproductive strategy, which prioritizes quality over quantity, is common in large, long-lived mammals but is extremely unusual in a rodent, and it makes the species deeply vulnerable to population decline from hunting and habitat loss because the population simply cannot replenish itself quickly enough to compensate for even modest increases in mortality. The Philippines is one of the most important and most underappreciated centers of rodent biodiversity in the world, with over 70 species of native rodent, more than half of which are endemic, meaning they are found nowhere else on the planet. The cloud rats, which include several species across different Philippine islands, are the flagship species of this extraordinary evolutionary radiation and a powerful reminder that the islands of Southeast Asia have been producing unique, strange, and wonderful animals for millions of years. But deforestation across the Philippines has destroyed the vast majority of the old-growth cloud forest that the giant cloud rats depend on for nesting, feeding, and shelter, and the species is now classified as vulnerable by the IUCN, with populations declining as the remaining forest fragments shrink, become isolated from each other, and lose the enormous old trees with hollows large enough for the cloud rats to nest in. Hunting by local communities, who have traditionally hunted the cloud rat for its meat using dogs and torches at night, adds additional pressure to a species that cannot breed fast enough to absorb the losses. Asia and its northern Luzon giant cloud rat easily take the first-place spot, and the fact that the world's largest rat is a gentle, fluffy, tree-dwelling herbivore that looks like a stuffed animal and produces only one baby per year is a reminder that rats are a far more